Everyone, welcome to another episode of Hashing Out the Law. I'm your host, Arash Hashemi. On this episode, I have a very special guest, Brian Williams. Brian is a fellow attorney. He does practice in the same state that I do, but his practice is a little bit different than mine. I wanted to bring him on and so we can talk about his practice. But before I continue, Brian, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Arash. Nice to be here.
Glad to have you on. Brian, let's just jump into it.
Sure.
One of the reasons I wanted you to come on here is I wanted to talk about a specific area of your practice, which is sexual harassment and slash hazing in youth sports. I know you recently had a case against a high school down in Orange County where a football player was, correct me if I'm wrong, pinned to the ground and hazed by his fellow football players. And when he went to get help, one of the players intercepted him and said, "This is football. You know what you signed up for." Um, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about the case, and then we'll dive into other areas and dive into your background as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great topic. It's one that's important to me. I have four kids myself, three of whom are boys, and my daughter's an athlete too. So athletes in high school and in youth sports they're supposed to be fun, right? We allow our kids to compete. I think it's great for them. They have a lot of fun. They get to meet their friends. And frankly, since I started it started with one case. It's not even the one you mentioned. It happened before. I gotten a lot because of that initial case, and I'm shocked at what I hear in terms of what takes place in locker rooms. When I was a kid, and Harash, I know you did athletes too. Like we might snap a towel on somebody, but it was benign. They were your teammates, and the things that the stories I've heard, I mean, they're alarming. And my goal is to bring awareness to the problem, so hopefully they stop.
So before we get into these stories, because I want to know about these stories,
Yeah.
let's talk about you. So, how long have you, excuse me, been practicing law?
Sure. I'm about 22 years in at this point, 21 or so. I've only done civil law from the very beginning. I don't know anything about criminal law, Rush. I'll leave that to you. Some of my cases, particularly involving sexual assault, have a criminal overlap, but I let that system play out separately. But yeah, I focus my area or my practice on civil litigation only. I exclusively represent plaintiffs at this stage of my career. I used to do defense work. Thankfully, I don't anymore. This is a lot more fun and rewarding. Um, and my primary practice groups would be childhood sexual assault, employment litigation, and elder or nursing home abuse.
Now, Brian, I ask this question of all my guests who are lawyers. At one point in your life, something clicked in your brain that made you say, "I want to be a lawyer."
Yeah.
When was that point, and what was it that was the catalyst of that? I want to be a lawyer.
All right. Great question. And I read your biomaterials, Arash, and I related to your version of that. I have a very distinct memory. I don't remember how old I was. I think I was like an early teen. I have an older sister, and we were fighting about something, arguing about something. And she said, "You refuse to lose an argument. You should be a lawyer." And it didn't click with me at that moment. I don't even know if I knew what that meant, but I to this day remember that conversation. And then as I was doing my undergrad, I was just a general business major. I actually went to work at a law firm, and my job was to like serve people and file documents in a court. And I just got introduced to the law as a business in that sense. And saw what the lawyers did on a daily basis, litigating. I played sports growing up, and I love the competitive side of sports. And I reached a point in high school when I'm like, clearly, I'm not going to be a professional athlete for a living. And so, to me, being a litigator and being a trial lawyer, and Arash, I know you know how this feels. I feel like it's the closest I can get to storming out on the field or the court to play a sport. It's that the closest level of competition that I've ever found.
Brian, that what you just described to me is what I tell people. Like when I
Yeah,
walk into court, that's the same to me as walking into the arena and getting ready to play the game.
yeah,
That's my arena. That's a beautiful answer. So
yeah,
your sister planted the seed in your
yep.
brain.
She
You
did.
you didn't know, but the seed was there, growing, being nurtured, and then all of a sudden, when it bloomed later on, you're like, "Oh my God, she
Yeah,
had a point."
that's right.
Awesome. That's great. So you start, I know you stated that you worked on the defense side. At what point did you switch to the plaintiff side?
So I had a defense law firm that I owned and operated for about 14 years. I actually started there as an employee and became an owner. Um, Most of my clients came from insurance companies, and I got just sick of having to deal with insurance carriers telling me, I'm asking for too much money on a case or not wanting to pay our bills or whatever it want to be. So I made a very clear decision, even though the firm was at its peak, to say, I'm out. I'm closing shop. And that was about 8, 9 years ago. I didn't really have a plan. I briefly went and worked for a public entity that was my hometown. They were a client of mine, and I thought, hey, I can go work for a public entity down the street from my house, spend a little bit more time with my kids than I had been as a practitioner, in private practice. Quickly got bored and was presented with the opportunity to go to work and run a plaintiff practice group. I jumped on it, and it's been full steam ahead ever since. From an expansion standpoint, we now have offices and 4 offices in 3 states and practice a variety area of law. So it's great.
So what firm is that?
Greenberg Gross. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
if we want to get a hold of someone in your firm or get a hold of you, how do we get in touch with you?
Sure. So website is ggtriallaw.com. Greenberg Gross. If you Google it, it'll pop right up first. That's probably the easiest way, and all our contact information's on there.
Okay. Now let's go back to this case that we were talking about with the football player. Uh,
Sure.
without giving away too much beyond the attorney-client privilege information, tell us a little bit about the case and the facts of the case if you can.
Yeah, no, I can. That case has gotten a lot of media attention in a planned way or foreseeable way. So this is all matter of public record at this point. But yeah, I have the privilege of representing a boy. He's 16 now. He was 15 at the time. He was a football player at Santa Margarita Catholic High School, which is a big Trinity League powerhouse football team with, a national reputation and NFL players that came from that school. He went to practice just like any other day. But except this day when he walked in to change out of his school clothes into his uniform, there was a group of teammates, a large group of teammates that were kind of huddled around his locker. They cut the lights, they pinned him to the ground, and they essentially took turns sexually assaulting him as he was pinned. He was able to free himself, get loose, ran outside as a 15-year-old kid that just went through something like that. He didn't really know exactly what to do. He called his mom, told her a little bit, but not the full story. Searched around, and as you pointed out, was on his way to a trainer's office, and he was stopped by another football player on the team, and a more senior player, and said, this is football. This is what you signed up for. And then, as we allege in our complaint, that's out in the media again, once this was reported by the mom, who once she found out, you can imagine, she's livid. Immediately went to the coach, immediately went to school staff, and was informed that the same type of event had happened to about 8 other kids. So this wasn't a one-off incident. This was a repeated activity. Call it hazing, call it whatever term you want to call it. But clearly not something that should happen in a civilized society, not something that should happen in a locker room. And it has changed my client's life. I mean, it really has.
Can we say specifically what was done to him?
I'm gonna leave it as assaulted. All right. I think
Okay.
in he is a kid, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay, not a problem.
Into
Uh,
the details. Yeah.
okay. How often does this happen in youth sports, according to your experience? Does it happen more often than we know?
Oh, I'm sure it happens more often than we know. I don't pretend to think I get all these cases, but I can tell you that this is not the first. I can tell you that as a result of the media attention that this particular case got, because it did get quite a bit, I've received a lot of phone calls, both from related school districts and completely unrelated school districts, of what happened. I'm aware of hazing cases that happen throughout the country. and that are filed and publicly spoken about. So it happens quite a bit. And that's the whole point is it needs to stop, right? And I think there's this what I hear as a consistent theme on the defense side in these cases are is the following, and this insults me, but it's boys will be boys. That's what I hear. And I think, no, that is, my example of, taking a towel and snapping somebody with it. Okay, that's a boy being a boy, right? That's a boy that, get in a locker room environment, you might do something that later in life you realize that was kind of stupid. This is different, pinning a kid to the ground, so restraining him and then actually sexually assaulting him. That's not boys being boys. To me, that's an institutional failure in that coaching staff, that school leadership allowed a culture to persist and a culture to fester. And boys being boys is something different. But if you keep ignoring it and you don't check it, then it escalates in severity and you get to some really bad consequences like we have here.
Yeah, especially since you mentioned it wasn't the first time that it happened and they already knew about it. That's
Yeah,
outrageous.
it's shocking. I mean, and Rush, that's in an email. I mean, you can imagine as from a lawyer, I'm like, I mean, how often do you see that, right? But it's an admission in an email that there was a repeated problem that they were aware of. It's tragic, it really is.
Wow. Um, let's switch gears. I know you said that you represent plaintiffs in elder abuse cases. Um, and I know off camera we were talking about that a little bit. Um, does that have to do with also sexual abuse in nursing care homes? Is that what the elder abuse comes from, or is it something different?
Well, see, it's for me, it started with sexual abuse, and I was quite surprised that I can tell you the very first case I ever got. I won't use any names or anything, but it was filed. Was a woman in a dementia care facility. She suffered from dementia, who was sexually assaulted by a fellow, I'll call him resident or patient of the facility. And what we found out was that this other patient had a documented history of going into other patients' rooms and assaulting them. In this particular instance, my client's husband actually walked in on it occurring and obviously freaked
Wow.
out and immediately reported it. And I guess it was from our experience or expertise in sexual abuse cases that that person found us. And I thought, wow, I was really surprised. I mean, now I'm not surprised, but I was at the first time. So, of course, I took the case, handled it, were able to get a great result for that family, which it was an awful thing that happened. And that for me has turned into other forms of abuse that take place in nursing homes. That could be any number of things, Arash. I have a lot of, neglect cases where, because of patient care and the needs aren't properly attended to, you get, bed sores and medical conditions that get much worse because of the neglect or the failure to provide appropriate care. I have a case right now where um, one of my clients in an elder facility was physically abused by staff for no apparent reason other than it made that, somehow enjoyable to that other staff member to physically hurt somebody um, for no apparent reason, right? It's just, I can't explain it. Um, I didn't expect that. That wasn't a planned entrance into that field of law for me. I'm really glad it happened because, you know, I really enjoy representing children who are abused, meaning that I get to use my law degree for, I mean, I can't imagine a better way of using it than to help seek justice on behalf of a survivor of childhood sexual assault. And I kind of feel the same way in the elder abuse context because just like kids, sometimes, our elders might, I think of my parents, I think, they reach an age where they do need to rely on others to help care for them, much like children need to be cared for when they're in elementary school and things. And those institutions, those nursing home facilities are operating for a profit and they cut corners and they need to be held accountable when they do.
I was going to say it's like representing two different parts of the spectrum, but they come together. You start as a child, you need people to take care of you, and then you end up being elderly and you need someone to take care of you. And unfortunately, the people who are supposed to take care of you sometimes abuse you, and you're there to help them. My
Yeah. And I was going to say, I was going to add to that. One of the other similarities I found, Rush, is if you think about it, like when you're a kid and you go to school, most of the times you're going to that particular school because it's the school in your track, right? Or the school in your neighborhood. And you're almost forced to go there. Your parents clearly have an expectation that they're going to take care of you and make sure it's safe, and bad things happen. In the nursing home context, people get put in nursing homes usually because of some sudden medical issue that arose. And their children of the nursing home patient have to make a split second decision about, like, where do we take mom or dad, right? And they trust this institution because they hold themselves out as being a viable uh, nursing home facility and think, hey, everything's going to be fine. That's what they do. And it's not. It's similar dynamics, similar dependency issues, and similar supervision needs.
Now, a football player in high school getting sexually abused by his teammates is not a good thing. But okay, elderly, helpless person getting abused in a nursing home, to me at least, is much more sad, for lack of better terms. And it would actually make me more angry and maybe depress me more. Um, does it bother you when you hear those cases? Well, let me rephrase. I know it bothers you,
Sure.
but does it bother you to the point where you go, I can't do this anymore because I don't want to hear these horrific things anymore?
Yeah, great question, and one I've answered quite a few times. So, does it bother me immensely? I do my best, and I'm sure you do this in your practice too, Arash, to separate work from home, right? I tell myself it's just a case. I'm here to do a job between, I would say 9 to 5, but as you know, lawyers are more like, 6 to 6 or whatever, 15-hour day you can work. And then I go home and I forget about it. But that's not true. I don't. I mean, there are cases that will never, ever, ever leave my mind. I'm sure until my dying day, I'll remember details that I don't want to remember. Um, I have a fantastic wife who helps me when I get home, kind of create that wall and try to create it, but it doesn't always exist. I use bourbon to help numb the pain at times, right? I mean, that's one of my coping mechanisms. I spend a lot of time with my kids. My kids would tell you that I am super overprotective. And I think that's a result, even when I'm not trying to be, of what I see from the child environment, of what I see happen in schools. There's no summer camps for my kids because I can't do it. I heard too many stories. So,
Right.
I mean, long-winded way of saying, yeah, it bothers me, but I never stop wanting to do it because, again, I look at it as I have this law degree. I think I have an ability to advocate and represent people. Why not represent kids that have been sexually abused, seek justice? You know, that's a great way to use a law degree, and elderly patients, elderly residents as well.
So let me ask you, of all the cases you've done, what is one that stands in your mind as the case that makes you feel, um, yeah, I'm doing the right thing?
So I don't know that there's one, but I'll give you a segment of cases. So in California, a few years ago, they passed what was called window legislation. Long story short, you could file cases for childhood sexual abuse no matter how old you were or how long ago the abuse occurred. Basically said there's no more statute of limitations on these abuse cases for a finite period of time. I got to represent a number of people who, when I met them, were in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who were abused as kids. And because of this law, which had great intentions, there's other windows throughout the country, I was able to give that now adult the opportunity to seek justice on behalf of their childhood self. They were able to, and we were able to prove up those cases, and we were able to find witnesses from back then that remembered, weird teacher or whoever, or the weird priest or whoever it might have been, and establish that the institution did something wrong. And so I took great pleasure by giving healing to someone who suffered for decades with the emotional ramifications of being abused as a child. It wasn't one case. I had a few hundred of them, but that was a really rewarding thing to do.
Great. Um, I'm gonna go dark a little bit.
All right.
What is the case that stands out in your mind that made you almost quit?
I'll tell you the case that made me quit being a defense lawyer. How about that? I used to represent, um, this is, a decade ago, or more than a decade ago, but a lot of trucking companies. And I would get hired to go represent a trucking company throughout the United States, usually to try their case or to handle some very significant personal injury or wrongful death matter. And I had a case where I was asked to represent a truck driver who was backing up a 18 wheeler with a trailer down a long driveway that was far too long for anyone to be backing up at night, and he ran over two people and killed them. Um, I got a call to handle that case the night that it happened, and it was, I lived a few hours away, so it took me some time to get there. But I actually went to the police station and saw items that, I mean, you're a criminal lawyer. I saw, flesh and just things that I never wanted to see again. And I just remember that was a defining moment for me where I'm like, I'm on the wrong side of this. And it took me a time to get myself out of it, but I never wanted to do it again. And or if I did have to see and go through those events, I wanted to do it on behalf of the person that was, you know, wronged.
Do you feel you were on the wrong side of justice?
I don't know about the wrong side of justice. Look, our justice system in the United States is great because there are two sides, and everybody has the right to hire a lawyer, and that lawyer has the job of holding the other side to the task of proving their case, right? I don't think it's the wrong side of justice. I think it was more just not for me. In the civil context, like you're keeping people or deciding whether someone goes to jail or not to jail, right? And the civil side for me, it was I got brought in on the defense side to bad cases where someone made a mistake, and the only question was how much, right? That how much is it worth? And so my job fundamentally was to try to keep people who deserve money from getting the most as much as they wanted. I was trying to keep the number down, and that was emotionally very, very unfulfilling. There's a role for defense attorneys in all kinds of cases. It just and there should be justice, but it's not for me. I would rather advocate on behalf of the family or the individual harmed and use my skills to try to get them their sense of justice versus the other side. Nothing against the other side. It's just not me.
All right. Let's go back in time.
Okay.
Um, let's say you decided not to be a lawyer. What would you be doing right now?
Can I, make myself a really good athlete and say professional athlete? Like I'd love to be playing golf for a living. How about that?
Yeah, I would
Um,
too, but let's talk
keep it
about
realistic.
yes.
Yeah. Um, one of the things I like doing is, again, I work at a law firm that's pretty large. I'm the managing partner of that firm. We have, again, multiple offices in multiple states. There's a business to the law, right? In addition to being a lawyer, I operate a business, and I actually really enjoy operating the business. So if I wasn't a lawyer, I think I would still enjoy that business operations perspective in a different industry. So I'm very interested in marketing. I'm very interested in, efficiency and leadership and things like that. So I guess I think I'd be an entrepreneur in some perspective, probably owning my own business. What that would be, I don't know.
Let me ask you a question. We know in law school, uh, they teach you the law. They don't even really teach you how to be a lawyer, let
No,
alone running a business.
correct.
Um, did you learn how to run a business when you opened up your own firm and had to learn from scratch, or is that something you studied at undergrad?
I mean, I was a business major in undergrad, but just like law school, it doesn't teach you how to be a businessman, right? Or business person. So the firm that I ended up owning, I actually worked straight out of law school. And so, yeah, there was two partners or equity partners in that firm, and I started as first year lawyer carrying briefcases for the guy that was going to try the cases, right? And as I worked my way up and had my own cases, I learned how to be a lawyer. And then once I was brought in and owned a piece of that firm, then you start running the business. And I read a lot of books. I consulted with a lot of different people and tried to learn best practices of how to operate a business. And I do that to this day. I don't pretend to know everything. I think lawyers generally make bad business persons, you know? I mean, they don't necessarily coincide. But I actually enjoy the aspect of what I do in terms of running a firm.
So let's talk about managing partner.
Okay.
Um, and this is for lay people, listeners and viewers who aren't lawyers, and have an idea what a managing partner is, but they really don't. So you're a lawyer, you actually go to trial, you do stuff, but you're the managing partner. What is your role of a managing partner, or what is the role of a managing partner in a law firm?
Yeah, great. It's a good one. I'd like someone to tell me. So it's really everything, right? I mean, yeah, I practice law for a certain number of hours a day, and that varies depending upon, whether I'm in trial or whatnot. And then I run a business, and that literally means I've got over 60 employees in multiple states, and I even have people who work for me from other countries, multiple offices. I'm rarely in one place at once. I'm in Orange County, our Orange County, California office today. Tomorrow's supposed to be in our LA office, and on Sunday I'm going to Las Vegas because we have an office in Las Vegas, and I'm going to be there Monday and Tuesday. So I travel around a lot. I deal with HR issues, I deal with accounting issues, finance issues, building logistics issues. I mean, everything that is involved, and there are times that I wish I could just be a lawyer, and let someone else handle that stuff, but those are few and far between. It's just part of it.
So since you're the managing attorney, I think this is a great question for you.
Okay.
Are you guys looking for a part-time criminal defense lawyer to work on the weekends in your Vegas office?
I don't do any criminal defense, so I don't think so.
I'm
Yeah.
willing to practice another area on the weekend.
Yeah, Vegas, our expansion into Nevada, and we're in a town. I don't know if you know where Summerlin, Las Vegas is, right up in the hills there. It's off the strip, close enough to where you can go and have a great dinner and then get out and go home. So, it's a lot of
I have a cousin that lives there, so
fun. Okay.
Summerlin. So
Yeah,
it'd be
it's
great.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It's a lot of fun.
Let me know if you want me to go instead of you to Vegas
All
anytime to
right.
cover
All right.
cover anything.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about one of the people in your firm
Okay.
who is a former deputy district attorney, special counsel, and they written a book, or the book is coming out. It's called "Defeating the Darkness," um, and it's the official title of it is "Defeating the Darkness," and it talks about cases for fight for survivors. Let's talk about fights for survivors and how that relates to you and your firm.
Absolutely. So Fight for Survivors is a what's the right word? I'm trying to think of the easiest way to explain it. It's part of Greenberg Gross. It is our firm. It is a specific specialized practice group that exists solely to represent survivors of childhood sexual abuse. We have our own website, fightforsurvivors.com, there's a dedicated team of lawyers that's all they do. And it also provides a lot of educational tools to it. You can, what do I do when X happens? Types of questions and answers and blogs, and it's meant to be a place where people can go if they need legal advice, if they just need to kind of learn about what sexual abuse is and what the signs of it and what to do if you've been a victim of it. That's Fight for Survivors.
Okay.
It
And
has its own socials too and everything, and it's
right.
just very, very specifically defined to help people that might be victim of that.
And we're gonna, for the viewers and listeners, we're gonna include links to all the socials, to all the websites for both Fight for Survivors and your firm.
Great.
So if they want to check them out, we're gonna tag you on all our socials, and we're gonna include it in the description of the podcast so they can see it. Let's talk about Heather Brown.
Yeah.
Does she work only exclusively in the Fight for Survivors area?
Yeah, so Heather Brown's a former Orange County District Attorney. She put bad guys behind bars. She was focused on sex crimes for a good portion of her career, and bad guys and gals, by the way. And then later, I think she ended her career in homicide. But she has a very distinguished track record in regards to the criminal prosecution of sexual predators. Um, she's retired, and so I thought, but she's here's the line I use from Heather. I knew she was a warrior because she was. I mean, she's tried a lot of cases and she fought really hard on behalf of those victims. And she needed to find a new war, right? Once she retired, and this became her new war, where she's using the skills and the expertise she learned to help people on the civil side. She has a unique understanding of how the criminal component of a sexual abuse case coincides with the civil component because they do overlap at times, which you can imagine is complicated from a civil prosecution and a criminal prosecution concurrently going on simultaneously. It's pretty hard. But she's written a book. It's a book, again, as you called it, Defeating the Darkness. It's designed to give inspiration, insight, and knowledge to survivors who may be thinking about, hey, do I want to come forward? Because the tragedy of sexual abuse is that it's often kept inside, and a lot of people never talk about it, or they delay, years or decades before telling anyone. And so Heather, given her experiences, tries to lay out what will happen, eliminate surprises, and hopefully, again, encourage people to come forward in an effort to prevent it from happening again.
Awesome. That's great. When the book comes out, I would love to have her on the podcast so we can talk about the book.
Absolutely.
I know you're a very busy man, Brian. I want to thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure. I could go back and forth with you and talk about war stories and talk about sports and how we both want to be professional athletes when we were young. But uh, again, for the viewers and listeners, if you want to get a hold of Brian and Brian's firm, the website is ggtriallaw.com. Greenberg Gross. You can get a hold of Brian. You can get a hold of anybody else there by going to their website. We will include it in the description. Any last words, Brian?
No, look, this was great. I appreciate all the questions. It's great topics to talk about. I agree with you. You and I could probably spend the next 45 minutes talking about sports or 3 hours or whatnot, but it was great. Thank you.
Thank you.